Hi everyone, it's great to see you. Welcome back. And today I'd like to talk about, well, I don't have a physical copy of it. We're going to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake INTERmission, which is a DLC that came out a little bit after Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I'll call it colloquially the Yuffie DLC. I think it's going to be easier because this is really just a little story about a character in the Final Fantasy VII world, Yuffie, and kind of an adventure she goes on midway through the events of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And a couple things I wanted to touch on was, technically there is a physical copy that contains Final Fantasy VII Intermission, and that is the PlayStation 5 version of Final Fantasy VII Remake. However, the game was in very limited print, so getting a brand new copy is quite expensive. But not only that, but the DLC included is a code to download the DLC. It's not and redeem it. It's not a code, or it's not a DLC on the disc. And so that's equally frustrating because a big part of it is essentially if you can't buy it new on PlayStation 5, then getting to get the PlayStation 4 version, upgrading, and purchasing the Yuffie DLC is what you have to do. It's kind of frustrating. I mean, if you buy a used PS5 game, it should just have the DLC on the disc, and if it doesn't, it's not due to limitations. It's due to the fact that they want you to pay for it no matter what, regardless. And that's fair. I mean, you're practicing your business the way you want to. However, to release this DLC, X amount of time after the full games come out and create this new special edition version for the PlayStation 5 and to not include all this DLC you've already released, that I find that to be a little frustrating as a consumer. But hey, I can complain. I can't, whatever. The DLC itself is $20 to buy on the PlayStation Store. However, buying it on the PlayStation Store is really confusing because if you look for Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission, what you're going to find is just versions of Intergrade, which Intergrade is the upgraded special edition version of the remake, whereas Intermission, in order to get it, and if you have a PlayStation 5 version, you then have to go and upgrade to the PS5 version, launch the game, and in the game there will be an area to access Intermission, and then from there it'll take you to the PlayStation Store where you can then purchase Intermission. Why you can't just purchase it straight from the store, I have no idea. And if you go and you find through the PlayStation Store the option to purchase it, then what you end up with is a link that says, oh, you can't, this isn't available. And so when I was actually trying to give Square Enix my money so I could play this expansion, it took me a little bit to figure out, like, okay, what edition, what version, what am I looking for? Okay, upgraded, okay, and even the upgrading part, if you have the PS4 get disc to a PS5, is kind of a mind bender compared to some titles I've played. So, that's here nor there. What I really want to talk about is the game itself, and just kind of preface with the idea that if you are thinking about purchasing and playing the Yuffie DLC before getting Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, there are some nuances to how you pick that up depending on the version you get. And so if you want to play it, don't buy the PS5 version used because you're not going to get it. You're going to have to purchase it anyway. And so if you want to buy a new unsealed version of the PS5 then you'll get the DLC, but it's not going to be on the disc. And you might have to go the route that I did and purchase it directly. So anyway, yes, Yuffie DLC. So Yuffie is a Wutai ninja, and Wutai is a nation state that it's on the western side of the planet, in that Midgar and Shinra and so on and so forth. And there was a big war in the past between the nation of Wutai and Shinra. And basically, to my understanding, Wutai didn't do so well in that war, and now they're just kind of like a tourist state. Yeah, that's kind of disappointing for them. However, that doesn't mean they're fully done. Kind of meddling in Shinra's affairs, and that's kind of what Yuffie is here for. She's a Wutai ninja, and she's come to Midgar to break into Shinra's headquarters and steal their ultimate materia. This materia they've developed that's crazy powerful and can do, I don't know, mind bending, destruction things. I don't know. They don't really get into it in the game. They just say, we're going to steal the ultimate materia, which I find funny because it really matches the character of Yuffie in the game. I think she's like a 16, 17-year-old girl, and it's goofy and kind of quirky and funny, but also badass at the same time, to be honest. Yuffie's got a sick move set and cool weapons, these like shurikens and ninjutsu skills, which are really cool. And so, that was fun. But to get back to the story, I think the story's pretty straightforward. You go into Sector 7 and you do some missions there. You go to Shinra and you basically get to the tower, and then you locate this ultimate materia and learn some things about it, and then you have to fight off against a couple of bosses there and along the way. But there are a couple of cool little additions that they've added to this game that weren't in the base game. The first thing is there's a whole story quest mission around this game called Fort Condor, and beating all these Fort Condor players in the Sector 7 area. And Fort Condor is pretty cool. You get these boards. It's like a board game. You get these boards, and with the boards you can choose a team setup of characters that fly, have defensive skills, and have attacking skills. And on each side of the board are 3 defense points, and essentially you spawn your team wherever you want, and then they kind of move forward towards the enemy's points. So you have to defend yours, you have to attack theirs, and it's pretty fun, and some of the boards can be quite challenging when you get through it. So entertaining to play. One thing though is that it's also easy to cheese. And essentially I would use this strategy of spawning an attack dog, and the attack dog is really fast, and they just ignore defensive and attacking enemies from the enemy side. They just run towards the closest hub and begin attacking. And so once they were over there, I would just spawn an infinite spawn of just low ATB consuming units to just keep pumping them in, and it would confuse the AI a lot, and I would just wreck. I would wreak havoc on all of them. So while Fort Condor was cool, I thought there's some things that could be done to kind of mitigate players who say, oh, I can skirt the rules and break the strategy of the game, which is something that I did. And then, it's funny, that's a big part of it, but also the plot itself is moving by like a speeding train in this game. There's this really funny scene where this guy in Sector 7 is talking about how, like, oh yeah, there's this person at Shinra and they killed my sister and we want to get revenge, and that's why I'm helping you and helping Wutai. And then literally they like turn their heads, and then he's like, oh my god, that's the person who killed my sister. And I'm like, okay, well that's obvious that's pretty obvious exposition, and I can't believe that they thought to do that right then and there. And the game only takes maybe 3 hours at max if you just play the story to run through it and experience it all. And at that, for $20, I was a little disappointed, and I was hoping for more, especially because when you get into the environments, the navigation, the world design, a lot of the areas you're revisiting are recycled assets. You're inside Shinra, and they have some cool new areas in Shinra, but a lot of it's things that were designed clearly for Final Fantasy VII Remake, and they haven't created a lot of new assets for the title. You're in like empty construction place, which clearly again is just like other recycled assets, and you're in Sector 7, so you see all the same characters that were in Sector 7, and this does take place midway through the plot of Final Fantasy VII Remake, so you would imagine that there should be some continuity visually in the game and visually in its design. But I was hoping for more. I was hoping for something unique and interesting that would really drive a purpose for buying a $20 3-hour DLC And in the world design and in the plot, it just wasn't there for me. Just from the lens of, not a lot happens. I mean, from the beginning, you're out to steal this ultimate materia, and 3 hours later, you've kind of accomplished your goal. I mean, you play it and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But there are some really cool innovations in the gameplay. The gameplay is very cool because you play as Yuffie, and you have this other character, Sonon, and they both play pretty differently from the way characters did in Final Fantasy VII Remake. The first big part of it is Sonon can't actually be controlled. You always play as Yuffie. And Yuffie has some really cool skills. She has this shuriken, which can be thrown, so it can be a ranged weapon, it can be a melee weapon. If you throw it, you can teleport to it and attack the enemy. She also has ninjutsu. So she has elemental ninjutsu, so you can change it from fire to ice to air to lightning, whatever you want. And you can cast that in a ranged form on enemies as well. So Yuffie's a very versatile character and very interesting to play. And I guess when you think about some of the aspects that I was describing, it does kind of make a lot of the materia options for Yuffie in particular not so valuable in this game, because you kind of have access to a lot of the things that materia is going to grant you straight through Yuffie. So I thought that to be an interesting choice. But Sonon does benefit in a lot of ways. You can't control him. However, in the middle of combat, you can basically sync your skills with Sonon. So if you sync, then when you attack, Sonon is attacking. And when you use an ability, Sonon is doubling your ability to produce a more powerful outcome. And some of those things are really cool. And it's really fun when you're like smashing on the last enemy and you see Sonon flying and Yuffie's flying in, and it's a byproduct of the fact that you've synced these moves and you're doing all these crazy skills. And so I thought what they elevated gameplay wise in the fighting was, I liked Final Fantasy VII Remake's fighting, but they did it even better here. And so it was really fun and energetic to play these moments, and I think they captured a good energy in it altogether. One thing they do in the gameplay to push it to its limits is in Remake, there's this little box course where you run around as Cloud and you hit these boxes, you get points, and you want to get the max amount of points you can for prizes. And they have a soldier training mode in this DLC, which is insane. I mean, the course requires perfection to complete and gives you just enough time to complete it. And I practiced it for like 2 or 3 hours trying to get it just right on every move with Yuffie. And so I guess someone at Square Enix heard these complaints about, like, okay, well, the box course is fun, but it's not very challenging. We want something more challenging. And they said, okay, all right, I hear you. We'll give it to you. Because it was a pretty big challenge, I got to be honest. So... and in the gameplay and in the fighting, whether you've completed the soldier training or not, I felt that the combat, the enemies, the bosses were all pretty easy. No one stood a chance against me and Sonon. I think that I didn't even get a chance to use it, even a potion in most circumstances, outside of resting at benches and things. And it is cool, you get a new familiar for summoning via materia in this game, and unfortunately, because of the length, I only got to use him once, and barely got to check out his skills and abilities, so that was kind of disappointing. But overall, the gameplay experience was as good as Remake and elevated slightly, and so if a big part of you enjoying Final Fantasy VII Remake was the gameplay, then I think you're going to get that here as well. Other big things, sound design, still really good. Yuffie, Sonon, all the new characters, they're voice acted quite well and fun. Like I was saying, Yuffie comes off very realistic to her age and to who she is, and I really enjoyed that she had a different energy about her than a lot of the characters we'd already met in Remake. And graphically, I mean, the game continues to look fantastic, so not so much to call out there, and of course it leverages the PlayStation 5 architecture similar to the upgraded version in order to deliver its final results. So that's a lot of what I wanted to say about Intermission. I thought story-wise it was pretty short, not too interesting. I bought this under the assumption that what's happening in the DLC is going to be important for the events in Rebirth, and maybe they could be. But one thing I wanted to point out is none of this is canon to the original series. So it's not like Yuffie had done this adventure in Final Fantasy VII, and so they're trying to live up to that before the events of Rebirth happen. It's just something brand new, and when I think about it in that way, it's okay. I guess the story's okay. The gameplay was really fun, and I love the ways in which they innovated and made Yuffie an interesting character to play, and the way they allowed you to sync and attack in tandem with Sonon and leverage his abilities in the fight. But the world design was a little stale, and the sound, there's a lot of great music returning here, and the game looks beautiful. So I think overall, if you enjoyed Final Fantasy VII Remake, you'd get something out of this if you just wanted to play and experience more of the action. If you're looking for something that's going to give you some more context for what's to come, I think it could be a skip, especially at the price of $20. So, and it's unfortunate that Square Enix hasn't considered to bring that price down a little bit. I don't know how long after this DLC's come out, and in my mind, I'm expecting they would never do it because Rebirth is on the way, and they want people to spend all that extra cash looking for opportunities to learn more about the series and about the characters and so on and so forth, like I did in this instance. So anyways, those are my big thoughts. Did you play Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission? And if you did, what'd you think about it? Did you have differing opinions than I would love to hear. And if you liked the video, please like the video. And would love for you to stick around more and talk about games with me. So please feel free to subscribe if you're interested. All right, well, until next time, hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.